Today you read about some intermediate forms, and obviously an intermediate form is a form that's going to be something in between a land reptile and a bird, or something in between a fish and a land reptile. So if those types of changes happened, then there had to be millions of intermediate forms in between an animal that crawls on all fours and an animal that flies. There had to be all kinds of intermediate forms, but we can't seem to find any. They have to be around if evolution happened. And so your book talks about two specific intermediate forms that scientists believe that they had found. Now, the information in your book on the Archeopteryx is actually a little bit outdated, so I want to give you some updated information on that. The Archeopteryx was one of the big things about that creature that led evolutionists to think that this was an intermediate form was because of the fact that it had claws on its wings. However, they've discovered a bird in the South American rainforest called a hoatzin, and I provided a picture of a hoatzin on there for you. It is warm-blooded, it has feathers, it has a really colorful crested head, it's got really long tail feathers on it. It's most definitely a bird. It tends to build its nest overhanging water. And what we've observed about it is that the chicks have claws on their wings when they hatch. And so when a young hoatzin gets frightened, it abandons the nest and it dives into the water. And when the threat is gone, it then uses the claws on its wings to grasp some of the low-hanging branches, because remember I told you the nest is built over the water. It uses its claws to grasp these low-hanging branches and to pull itself up out of the water. Now the claws are present for about 100 days, and then they disappear. So when they found this living example of this bird, they're like, well, Archeopteryx then isn't really going to be the intermediate link, because obviously this bird has claws on its wings at least part of the time. And so then two theories were developed. One is that, well, the hoatzin must have developed claws because it had to get back up in the nest. Well, if the chick didn't have any claws, the chick wouldn't make it into the nest to begin with. And so it's going to die. And if you're a dead chick isn't going to evolve. So the second problem with that idea is that evolution doesn't plan for the future. It's strictly by chance is what they tell us. And so therefore you can't plan to evolve claws so that your chicks will survive. It doesn't work that way. And so therefore, because the hoatzin has claws, the Archeopteryx is not a transitional form, and evolutionists are now going to agree with that statement, contrary to what your book says. The book just doesn't have the most updated information in it. Now, there are some Chinese scientists who have actually found another, what they call dinosaur with feathers. It's supposedly older than Archeopteryx because it was found in the rock layers underneath where Archeopteryx was found. The problem is that the bird that the Chinese scientists found, or this dinosaur with feathers as they call it, is still in the wrong rock layer because there's birds underneath of it. And secondly, just like Archeopteryx, it has full feathers. There's no structure in between scales and feathers, which an intermediate form should certainly have. If it's going to be intermediate between a reptile and a bird, there should be some sort of change between the scales and the feathers, and we don't see any of that. Archeopteryx had fully functional wings, just like this dinosaur with feathers were that they have now found in China. Additional things about the Archeopteryx that they used to think that was a transitional form was because I mentioned the claws on their wings. Ostriches actually have small claws on their wings as well, and they said, well, Archeopteryx has teeth, birds don't have teeth. Well, not all reptiles have teeth either. And so they said that was an evidence of it being another transitional form, but not all reptiles have teeth. So if you Google information about Archeopteryx, you'll find that evolutionists are no longer calling this an intermediate form, but now what they're calling it is a bird-like dinosaur or a feathered dinosaur. And so now evolutionists are claiming that all birds are technically dinosaurs. So I guess if we can't make one turn into another, we'll just call them all the same thing, maybe. The other transitional form that your book mentioned was Australopithecus Efferensis, and the easy way to say that is to call her Lucy, because it was they believe it was a female, this set of fossils that they found, a skeleton. Since your book was written, there have been other skeletons that have been found of the same type that Lucy was. They show hands of an ape, not a human, and they also show long toes that look like an ape's, not a human's. There's also been additional evidence found that would indicate that Lucy and these other skeletons that were similar to hers, that they knuckle walked just like an ape does. Now, I do want to point out to you, and you'll see this in the second picture underneath the Hotzin, that was taken from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. This picture was taken from their website, and you can see that in the picture of this ape, they have given the eyes of this ape, normally the sclera, which is the white part of your eye, that's called the sclera. And so in humans, the sclera is white. In apes, the sclera is dark. But in order to make some of these drawings look more human, sometimes the way that artists will make these models is, and as an example of this one, they actually made these scleras white. So when we look at this picture of this ape, we're like, oh yeah, I can see that maybe it looks a little bit like a human, but they did that by making the scleras of the eyes white, when that's not what the scleras of an ape actually look like. There is a big difference between the eyes of an ape and the eyes of a human. And so sometimes some of these pictures are kind of doctored to make you think what they want you to think about it, or what they want to believe about it, maybe is a more accurate way to put that. If you want to believe that an ape turned into a human, then you're going to do things to the pictures that you draw to try to make that ape look more human. And so that's one way that they do it, is by making those scleras white instead of brown. So I just wanted to point that out to you. So again, so you're seeing some of these different things. We're going to actually have a video a couple of days from now that's going to talk a whole lot about doctored pictures. So we'll come back to that topic here in a couple of days.